Welcome to the Riff. Today, Jeremy sits down with Justin to walk through the top 10 things that Jeremy's learned through his first 10 years at North Point. And since it's the Riff, they only get through 5, but a powerful 5 they are. And don't worry, 5 more are coming next week. We hope today is helpful. Thanks for listening.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Riff. We are thrilled to have you with us. Justin.
Yes.
We've often mentioned our growing or blossoming Belgium followers. We heard from this week, I heard from this week from some Florida listeners that they would like a shout out as well.
All the way down south.
Wow. My daughter listens every week, and she said, shout me out. So Sydney, I know Janaea, I'm sure listens, but did not mention that she does. So welcome Florida as well.
Welcome Florida.
Yeah.
Good to have you.
It's great to have Florida here. So, I would say the average age of our listener in Florida is a lot younger than the average person's age in Florida. So
I don't know.
We trained a little younger because
I haven't hung out at any retirement homes in Florida, but I would guess that the Riff is on the dial.
Yeah, honestly, one of my dreams is to hang out at a retirement home in Florida. I'm going to be a pickleball champion. And I will hit the Golden Corral at 3:00 and be watching Wheel of Fortune from bed at 5:30. So that's my retirement bucket list right there.
All right.
So,
all right. Listen, today, I think we're going against the grain.
I know.
So,
but if you're petting the cat the wrong way, maybe the cat just needs to turn around.
You've always said that. You've always said that. Yeah. You don't ever not say that.
No, every time.
We're not riffing today.
No,
You have a paper in your hand.
I got a paper.
Things written down.
Yeah.
I'm nervous.
I'm disappointed. I am disappointed. But here's the deal is I am, as we record this, I'm about ready to jump into a sabbatical, a 10-year sabbatical.
Yes.
Not that I'm going to be gone for 10 years.
You've been here.
Yeah, a sabbatical from being here for 10 years.
Yes.
Now, I tried to do this a few years ago, and then COVID happened. And so
details.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So this one is going to be, all I know is our political climate, our world climate. There's not a chance anything can go wrong.
It's way smoother.
Yeah.
So today we're going to do 10 lessons.
10 lessons, 10 principles, 10 nuggets.
10 nugs. I call them nugs.
Yeah, no,
anytime
absolutely.
A nugget
dinosaur shaped? Is that the kind of chicken nuggets you eat?
Wendy's.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, spicy nugs.
Yeah.
So 10 nugs in 10 years.
Yeah. So, now,
all right.
I'm going to go down this journey. So we'll see.
Okay.
So 10. Now here's what I want. I want for those who are joining us, especially specifically North Pointers. I think there's some general principles we'll hit. But I would say there's 10 things that I feel like is I've given the last decade of my life to serving in this capacity. And as I kind of pull away from that first decade and evaluate it, these are the first 10 things that I thought of, these are important principles that I don't want to forget. So that's why I wrote them down, and hopefully they'll be encouraging to anybody. But specifically for North Pointers, I think it's going to be helpful for looking at our journey and just kind of who we are. So
okay, all right. Number 1.
All right, let's do it. Number 1. And this is kind of as I jumped into this whole journey of North Point, I reflected on this. Number 1 is to be willing to let go of the last thing in order to take hold of the next thing. So be willing to let go of the last thing in order to take hold of the next thing. I think that's true for anything in life. Is certainly true in relationships. In order to take hold of that next season, you got to let go of some of the last season. I know getting married, that was the case. There's some elements of the single life of being out playing ping pong with my buddies till 1 a.m. You get rid of thinking about just your own finances. You got to get rid of that, let go of that to step to the next one. Specifically, though, for this was Leanne and I actually really enjoyed every season of our journey so far in ministry. And we were in Seattle And we had been in Seattle about 20 years at the time, 10 years ago when we were first contacted by the leadership team of North Point. And while we were open to something, we had actually felt like, man, there's going to be something new. We really had to say, okay, hey, we're willing to move. We're willing to let go of familiar. We're willing to let go of location where we've been for 20 years, family proximity, all those things. And why we were able to quickly recognize and jump into this season of moving to Springfield was because we processed that thought of, okay, if we feel God's stirring something new inside of us, we have to be willing to totally take the parameters off of it and say, okay, whatever it is, God, in front of you, in front of us, we want to say yes. So for us, from the first day North Point called, it was John J. Wilson calls me August 1st, 2012. And he actually sent me a message on Twitter. And he said, hey, don't know if you've heard, we have a transition. I'm on the leadership team of a church here in Springfield, Missouri, North Point Church. It's a great church here. Would love to talk to you about it. Any chance we could jump on a phone call? That was August 1st. August 13th, so 12 days later, we were like, totally agreed to come and hadn't been out here, but just like, okay, for us, why were we able to quickly go for it is because let go of the last thing. So, I don't know.
What happens when something overlaps, right? So, I mean, I think you're talking about like a job or finances, or when you get married, there's kind of that natural spot where you're like, this is the new, that's the old.
Yeah.
What about those things that kind of merge where you're like, I don't know if this is new. Should I let go of this old? Yeah. Especially the 10 years that you've been here, right? I mean, there's been a lot of changes and movement, and there hasn't been like okay, that's the end, right? So how do you let go of that? How do you recognize that?
Yeah, I think recognizing that we tend to assume God's going to do something in our future in the way that it looked like he did it in our past. I know church as a general rule does. So an expression of God moving in the 50s is what some churches still will hang on to of like, okay, it's got to look like this, or, it's got to be a 3-hour service, then we know God moved, or it's got to be a response in a certain way. So for me, some of the most meaningful moments in my past need to always be meaningful, but to recognize what got me here might not get me there, and that God might do something different. So how do I recognize that? Just being willing to let go is a big deal. It doesn't mean you're going to, and change doesn't always mean it's from God. New is overrated, but being willing to say, okay, God, I'm willing to let this next season look totally different than this last season. And then we're going to get into that in one of the principles of recognizing mission or method, and we've done a podcast on it.
I'm not going to. Don't do that.
Way down there. But to think, okay, am I willing to let go of any style, any method in order to do so? And then you just kind of, weigh it out that way.
It's good.
So, all right, so that's the first thing.
Number two.
Okay, so I wrote it down this way. I don't know that sound bites aren't sound. So outside of context, this would kind of be weird.
But if they were going to do a sound bite, start now.
Yeah, don't do that.
No.
So I put God speaks and then he splits. God speaks and then he splits. Not theologically. I understand that God is always there, but I think experientially. That sometimes you feel like, okay, God will give you some moments of clarity, and then you've got seasons of confusion. And I know that's been my situation in life. And what I try and do in those situations, and why I would encourage all North Pointers to kind of process this, is I value moments of clarity. But I also understand that that's unique. And so in moments of confusion, I just got to look back to what was my last moment of clarity and keep doing that. So confusion doesn't mean I stop. Confusion is a time where I will tend to stop. I will tend to whine. I will tend to scramble for something new. And I've got to understand, okay, when God is clear about an area, just go forward. And that's for us. when it comes time to, coming to North Point for us, we felt God speak clearly. We don't need to feel that every day. We don't need to feel like, oh my word, I woke up today and man, this is the place I need to be, right? I need to be open for God to steer it. But until God speaks something differently, this is a moment of clarity, right? It's true in marriage. There are so many days I wake up and say, this is the woman I married. This is awesome. And I'm sure her with me as well. But there are days where you're like, don't necessarily need to feel anything significant, but you still go with your last moment of clarity. And I think that's helpful. And then you just commit your life to it. So I just feel like for those who make a commitment to following Jesus, a lot of times we make those commitments because of a moment of clarity, something that we can't shake, something that's undeniable, whether we attribute that to an experience with God or a mentor speaking something to our life. But when we know this to be true, we take that next step, and then we have to assume my next 17 steps might not have any clarity. Mm-hmm. That's all right. Where were your last marching orders? So I think that's important. I think that's important for the church because as we look at the church from day one, North Point was set apart to be a church that reaches people who live in the Bible Belt, who for whatever reason have said no to church or perhaps said no to Jesus or thought they just weren't going to be labeled that way. And North Point existed. There was clarity in this movement to start. North Point exists to create this environment where people can encounter Jesus Christ, to be all about changed lives, to be a safe place. And so what we need to understand is when we don't have that sense of clarity is always go back to that mission. So yeah, moments of clarity.
It's good.
So
I like that one.
Number 3, I put when we're not full of resources, we should be resourceful. There will be different seasons when you're not full of resources, be resourceful. I believe everybody is going to be poor at least one point in your life. Some people extend that a long time. Some people escape it, okay? But I believe as a general rule, most people will be poor at some point in their life. My recommendation is get it over with early, right? When you're first, become an adult, you're probably going to be poor. That's all right. But as a church, we realize the same thing. There are going to be seasons where you have plenty and seasons where you feel like you lack. And I know you've been on the team here for 12 years, 13 years. Mm-hmm. And so there have been different seasons where we had resources when we had an opportunity. It's like, let's do it. Okay. What prop do we need to buy? No big deal. What property do we need to lease? No big deal. And there's been seasons where we're like, oh my goodness, everybody bring your own beverages to staff meeting. Right. And so when we came to North Point, we were not in a season as a church where it was resources were full. It was resourceful. It was the implication for us. And so, and that's all right. I think you can learn some great principles when you don't have plenty. And I think it teaches you some great things. For example, like when I think of scripture, the Israelites, when they were coming out of Egypt, they had manna, which is a Hebrew word that means, what is this? And so maybe some of you grew up having manna, like you're like, what is this? But bottom line is every day they would have it, and it would be, God said to them, you can go outside your tent and you can collect it only for the day. And if you try and collect more than a day's provision, then it will get moldy. And part of it is like, why is God like, is that like a, it was just kind of like a test, of him trying to learn how to bake, did he not figure out how to have some preservatives in there? But I think it was a spiritual principle that while this nation was learning dependence on God, he was saying, I'm going to give you a daily dependence on me. And if any of you feel like you can get 7 days reserves, you might think you're just an awesome gatherer and you think you're the best. But I want every day for you to have this awareness when you wake up. I hope God shows up today, because if he doesn't show up today, we're starving. And not that I believe that every time we have lack, God's like, ha, 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 who's your daddy? But I do believe there are lessons of stewardship that can carry over when you have plenty, and there's lessons of dependence, and we jumped into that. You've seen that,
I have. I got a question on it too. We've gone through resourceful, and we have no resources, right?
Yeah.
Like there's been those seasons. So how have you as a leader, when we've come from this like lack of resource moment,
Yeah.
And we've walked into this resourceful moment where we have these resources. How do you as a leader kind of walk into that and not have a scarcity mindset, but also not have like a lavish mindset, right? Because there's something in the middle there that when you do have resources, they're there for a reason, right? So how do you walk into that to where you're just not like, oh, I'm afraid to lose it. Or also like, let's buy everything, right? How do you stay in that space?
Yeah. Well, one, I think the church is not a bank. So we should have enough resources where we can make good ministry decisions without wondering if we're going to still have opportunity tomorrow. So for us, if we could have ideally 6 months of resources, tucked away. That way we can, if we ever had a pandemic, we ever had anything that would change attendance or giving, those kind of things, recessions, those kind of things. It's just wise to be able to have reserves. So I think that's a part of it. But outside of that, it's not like, okay, can we have more resources and more resources and more resources? No, because everybody who gives through North Point, they want to give through North Point. And so we want to be able to do great ministry. So I always have the mentality of every penny that we collectively bring together comes from someone's obedience. Every penny. So would this money, would this expenditure make someone proud that they said, I invested this through North Point and this really brings about vision and purpose. Now, I know that sometimes buildings and payroll and those things aren't sexy, but bottom line is the general rule of everything we do is stewarded in that way. That's awesome. Here's the other thing that sticks in my mind. When we weren't full of resources, we had to say no to some opportunities. Then there was one purchase. It was a house right next to the Dream Center. And adjacent building, and I don't know, a half an acre, and it was adjacent. I put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
I've heard people say that. I didn't know if that's a Northwest thing.
I think that when they taught me in my doctorate school at Southeastern, it's more of an adjacent. Now, you'll find some doctorate programs are adjacent based, but
I also find it odd that your doctoral program comes up so often with us.
Well, here's what I feel. When no one else brings it up, I feel like I should. I don't know. I've read that word way more than I said it. To be honest, I think that might be the first time I've said it out loud, and now I fear I said it wrong.
No, I think it's right on.
Yeah.
All right.
So
house
the property right next to it, adjoining. But we could have definitely used that space, and we could have definitely used the house. And it was $100,000, and we had the first right to buy it, and we didn't have $100,000. $100,000 was crazy. Now that $100,000 would have been able to now facilitate a lot more ministry, some probably creative housing for interns that would really help us go forward in the community. At the time, we had to say no. That's one example.
Yeah.
But when you have to say no to something that would be great for the ministry, but we just can't swing it right now, that drives me in seasons of resourcefulness, never get back in that position as best as we can help it. Let's always strive to have the right principles in place so that we can always say yes to opportunities that will move us forward. And that's what margin is for. Margin isn't for us to buy brand name and more stuff that we don't need. Margin is to be able to say yes to ministries when they move the needle forward.
It's good.
Yeah. So.
Good.
But if we go through seasons again, and we will, I'm sure, as a church, where we have to be resourceful, that's all right. And that's the old example. You watch a good prison movie is they're not allowed to have weapons in prison, so they just make them, right? That bar of soap, that could become a shank in a hurry, right? Like, people will just be resourceful when you're not full of resources, and we want to do the same.
Good.
So, all right. Fourth one, I put this, is I cannot give what I do not have. And that's me as a pastor, but it's also anybody as a follower of Jesus. I cannot give what I do not have. So here's one thing as I look at the last decade of my life, is my relationship with Jesus is greater than my role for Jesus. What I do for Jesus, I don't want to mess up, because I'm fully aware that what we all do has some great eternal stakes. And so I don't want to be I don't want to be the reason why people don't say yes to Jesus. But at the same time, as important as whatever role we're a part of is, and it is important, but my relationship with him is way more important because I can do things for him, but again, you're going to be pouring out. And so I need to be pouring in. And so as I look back at it, one of the things that I am excited about is I love Jesus more today than I did 10 years ago. And I did love him actually 10 years ago. I was excited, but I do. And part of that is we have a great team that allows us all to remind us, hey, here's the role we're each going to play. And so it's not all on one person's shoulders. And let's be connected. Let's be connected to the source. Especially, life is draining, ministry is draining, parenting is draining, everything we do is draining, and so let's just not be surprised by that. Let's always be filling in. So I think that's important in any season.
So you cannot give what you do not have.
Yep.
Right. How have you gotten?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like how have you? So you can give. How have you brought things into your life to where it's filled that to where you can give?
Well, one of the things that my specific role requires is I'm always having to pump out content, right?
Like every Sunday, right?
Every Sunday,
yeah.
And that would be messages. But then there's whether it's staff meetings, whether it's podcasts, whether it is outside even our church environments to be able to share with other pastors or what might.
Yep.
So for me is I feel like, okay, I have to be always pouring in more than I'm spitting out. And so whether it's leadership books, it's scripture, it's always in. For me, that's why I document stuff. That's why I'm always writing notes. That's why I'm always filing and taking notes, because what I have to do is I have to be able to have more coming in and then going out. It's simple math for me. But even if it weren't content-based, just meeting with people. We have some people on our team who's their full really the biggest plate for them is just trying to be emotionally present for others and help navigate and walk people through really tough situations. Well, that is draining, right? So they have to be able to come to the day absolutely filled, ready to spill out. And that is just recharging their battery. That's just a principle in life. It's a lot better efficiency and predictability in life to always charge your battery instead of occasionally jumpstart your battery, right? Like, because then you're going to break down. And I've done that. I've had more outflow than inflow, and that's when we break down.
Good.
So, 5, I put taking chances as risky, not taking them as even riskier. As I look back, there's been some times we've taken a chance, whether we're starting a service. There's been some things that we're always going to throw different hooks out there to try and reach people. And it could be, I remember we did for a season, we've done Wednesday night service that was a weekend service for people who work on the weekends, wildly successful for a dozen or two people that came to that. We've done Sunday night unplugged version of service. We've done different versions of young adult gatherings. We've had different staff roles. We've done different campuses. Joplin probably the most significant in terms of investment financially, in terms of promotion and vision, personnel. There's been things that we've gone way big on to take a chance. Every time we take a chance, we're not just throwing the dice. For me, it's we have this intuition, this gut, either one, this spiritual direction of, hey, this would be a great idea, lean into this, or we're just so excited about our mission, we're willing to try anything that would help us reach our mission. And sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. My biggest challenge would be this, is I'm going to be all in on it, right? I'm going to be excited about it. I also am very aware that when it doesn't work, I've already been loud about it. I rarely do anything quietly. And so when I go back to staff and I'm like, hey, remember that last great idea I had and it didn't work? I got another one. I'm aware that not everybody's as excited about his opportunity as me. And I'm also aware that some of us by nature, we're historians. And we can say, well, the last one didn't work. And I don't know that I want to get excited about this because the last one didn't work. And if I am like that, or I sense that I could be too sensitive to that, end of the day, though, you're just like, whatever. Our mission is too important to not take risks at it. And if we wait for God to be super clear to say, thus saith the Lord, you will go 70 kilometers this way. And it's a word from God. And if we wait for those crazy, weird, prophetic clarity moments where we can't even argue, and if it fails, it's obviously on God, then we'll never do anything because it's going to be so rare. So there's going to be times as leaders in any situation, you got to say, this feels right. Here's the mission. I feel like this is going to help us get there. Let's go. And there'll be times where it's awesome, and there'll be times where it's not awesome. And that's kind of, even looking back, when I was in Seattle, one day we launched 2 campuses in one weekend. We had one, we went to multi-site, and so we launched 2 in one weekend, and they went pretty good. One was better than the other. And so then we went to this idea of, hey, let's just launch a bunch of campuses, knowing not all of them are going to work, but a lot of them will. And so for us, we weren't going to be like, every campus must work. For us to build credibility upon credibility upon credibility is like, hey, we'll win some, we'll lose some. And then we launched 5 in one day, right? And I don't know that's not the goal. That's chaos and all those kind of things. But the mentality, which is so freeing, is let's just go. And we're not going to be imprisoned to perfection. And so I'm going to grieve the losses. Every time we try something that doesn't work, I grieve that because I wanted that to work really bad. I felt that was a great opportunity to advance the mission, but I will not fear failure. So I believe in the next decade, we'll launch a campus that does not work. Now, I don't think it'll be the next one, nor will it be the next one or the next one. Every one, we don't think it'll be that one, but I'm all right with that. Yeah. If someone were to say, hey, Jeremy, in the next decade, we're going to launch 3 campuses, 2 of them will work, 1 of them won't. Will you do it? Yeah, absolutely. Roll that dice, baby. So,
well, I think that goes back to number 1 as well.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to be willing to let go. So if you're listening and you really love number 1, but you're like, number 5's, no, I don't. It's the same thing. Like, that's how you get there, right?
Yeah.
Good.
And one of the things about our team too, and that's why we have to always have a team that's like, hey, now let's not fail at something because of poor strategy, right? And there's some elements of that. We can always be like, well, you win some, you lose some. No, let's milk this for all it works. So there are strategic meetings. It's not as easy as, before you have that funeral for that idea, you got to have an autopsy and say, why didn't that work? We've got a brilliant team who's going to help us give us a better shot in the future. And I feel like if we do the homework on the front end, then the team, as a general rule, is going to say, all right, let's go for it, and we'll do what we can.
Now, I've got a question for you. This it's big.
Yeah.
We're almost at 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, we usually do 30-minute podcasts. Are you willing to go another 30? Are you ready for this to be an hour podcast? Or do you want to break this up into 2 parts? This is the only part of this episode that we're riffing on.
Ooh.
But this is the riff.
Here's the challenge. Is my understanding is we've got a few podcasts that I won't be able to record for. So let's just cut it here.
Okay.
And let's go to. We'll do an episode 2. Should I change my shirt and pretend it's a whole different day?
Inside out.
Inside out.
Yeah, I think just inside out. For part 2. Okay, so part 1 over. 1 through 5.
5 things from the first 5 years. But I've got 5 more.
Next week?
We'll drop it next week.
I love it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
That's good. Hey, thanks for listening to us. Belgium, Florida, the greater Ozarks area. And when I say greater Ozarks area, I'm not talking down to the lesser Ozark area. No. I mean all of the Ozarks area. All of it. The whole great region. Okay. So, all right. Thanks for joining us. And I'm already excited about next week's.
It's going to be great.
They know it's going to be in a second, right?
Yeah.
But next week's episode, it's going to be great. Have a great week. We'll see you in a week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. Submit a question for the podcast at northpointchurch.tv/podcast. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.